The problem of perspectivism. So often today we hear ourselves, we hear others speak about points of view, opinions, of course, relative to the speaker. The speaker is speaking in a certain context. This context is historical. We all know that. Or we all believe to know that because we have been taught that much. How is that possible? That we are not speaking that way, that we are not expressing points of view. When we listen to someone, we seek a point of view that we can then integrate onto our horizon, enrich or empower our own point of view. And of course, if we could only integrate all points of view into one, then we would have a global point of view. Well, this whole conception of discourse, of awareness, of consciousness, is a peculiarly modern one that has developed or unfolded throughout the modern age. And it entails the replacement of what we could call God's point of view, which is to say, no point of view at all, but reality itself. So things considered as they are in themselves and in a conclusive manner, with, well, a global point of view. So unity established on the basis of diversity. So unity presupposed by diversity is replaced, or supposed to be replaced, by unity that presupposes diversity. All right. So the actuality that is presupposed by potentiality is now replaced by an actuality grounded in potentiality. Potentiality precedes, in an absolute sense, actuality, what is actual. This is what modernity teaches. Of course, overturning common sense, overturning thousands of years of discourse. We are so used to it that we don't question it. Why are we so used to it? Well, because we are bombarded with this type of discourse. A discourse that essentially seeks to reconstruct its own foundation. Right? So necessarily this is a discourse that has abandoned, one could even say betrayed, its original telos, its original orientation, the original orientation of logos, of discourse. A natural orientation, since it is original, it is peculiar to its constitution, to its natural constitution. So we could say that that orientation has been obscured, covered up by this, well, promise, the new promise, which is akin, of course, is represented by, akin to that of Dr. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, where we see that life is supposed to be created out of non-life, right? So consciousness out of unconsciousness. And this, of course, is the whole idea underpinning the doctrine of evolutionism. But we take all of this for granted. Now, that is something extraordinary. The manner in which we have been drenched in our upbringing, drenched in this notion that, there is no, shall we say, no fundamental capacity in the human being to speak outside of this picture. In fact, this Weltanschauung, this worldview, right? What happens? We automatically assume that our interlocutor is expressing his view. Am I not expressing my view? Instead of focusing on the argument, on what used to be called reason, natural reason, which is to say, the natural orientation of discourse. Am I speaking in expressing my views, or my certainty, or in fact in defending my own sphere of autonomy as an individual? Or am I dedicating myself? Am I giving myself out to the Logos when I speak? So I enter into a sphere of discourse. So this I no longer counts. Or if it counts only to the extent that it gives itself to the Logos, and that it is, in that respect, the Logos itself. So a good speech would be a speech that is, well, rational in that sense. But in the modern context, reason has been reconceived in mechanical terms. So reason is about applying rules and regulations to reality, or rather to experience. And so it can seem oppressive because it is imposed, this is the idea, imposed upon our ordinary life. So what are we supposed to do? Well, we're supposed to be free. We want to be free. And so to be free, we don't want to reason, because to reason is to impose a certain rule. But this rule is going to be, shall we say, gratuitous. It can work in the hard sciences, in physics and chemistry and so forth, but they change their rules as well. However, when it comes to human affairs, we want freedom, not rules. And so we seek expressions of sentiment, of feelings, which, to be sure, change all the time, but they don't want to be oppressed by these rules and regulations. Well, this sense that we have is based on an anarchic conception of the human being. The human being here is not by nature inclined to reason, but simply to self-express itself, right? To self-express. This is all about imposing a certain view or seeking a certain space to be recognized there. So essentially, the human being is irrational. No doubt, he can become mad, but is that what he is born for? Now, in classical terms, you're happy when you do what you're born for, right? But in modern terms, we're all born to do different things. That is to say, to express our own points of view in a pluralistic universe. So there is no happiness in a universal sense. To claim that there is, go to Aristotle, Nicomachean Ethics, would be to assert that there is a leveling out, there is a homogenizing of the human being. This is totalistic, it's fascistic, it's bad, because it represses our differences, it obscures them, it does not allow us to be free. Well, of course, you could say, well, then from the vantage, from the point of view of the ancients, already it's a giveaway, right? Yeah. Well, if you wish to frame the debate in those terms, then you could say yes, from the point of view of the ancients. So in other words, if you look at the ancients from outside, you see already when you say from the point of view of the ancients, you're assuming that you've framed them. So you're playing into this relativistic game. From the point of view of the ancients, well, you're not expressing yourself when you speak. You are on a path to reality, or to the mind of God. And so you reason. In other words, you enter into the sphere of reasoning. You tread the path of the logos. And this is primordial for the human being. But that's just a point of view. Okay. All right. So what do we say to that? Well, that is already to give an answer to everything. Is it a point of view? Is it? How do we know? Is that not our own point of view, that it is a point of view? You see. How do we get out of this? Well, we could look at the essential genesis of this discourse of points of view, and we can see that it comes out of the early modern invention of a new self that that is situated and yet not situated in the world. Situated in the respect that it cannot escape its own world. Not situated in the respect that, it takes its view for granted, its fundamental view for granted. We're all in this picture that we have conceived, or somebody has conceived it for us. Kind of dream. Can we escape from this dream? Well, if there is no essential natural link that ties us to an identity, in fact, a reality outside of the dream, then there's no way out. Now, in classical terms, that link is reason, and it, as discourse, binds us to an identity that deserves to be called our perfection. Right? So what is the perfection of man, ultimately? Of finite being in its cardinal valence? Well, God. Atman Brahman, for the Indian Sanskrit tradition. Clearly, we have the human that is inseparable from the divine, and vice versa, actually. So one refers to the other. You say, well, we have rejected that. Okay. But that is what is presupposed, what is being rejected. Right? We can enter into this condition of, essentially, self-enslavement. We can be driven by others, because these are views come up that people come up with. They're not given to us by God directly, right? So we can be driven into believing that there is no fundamental perfection to the human being that is presupposed by the human imperfection. Right? So we can say that, that this view is derived, or the result of, anyway, the forces of evolution. Okay. Well, these forces of evolution, forces of change. In other words, ultimately, some kind of a vortex. This vortex has brought about these views that are supposed to be the real views, that are freeing us from this older notion of a divine perfection of the human being being finite being. So then we have the human perfection, divine perfection, that is infinite or indeterminate being, not determined anywhere, but absolute being. And that supposes that that there is obviously a link between the two. Now the question of how we understand that link is, can it be measured or not? Obviously, for the classics, it cannot be measured geometrically, but for the moderns, the early moderns at any rate, it can be. And then we find out that, therefore, if it can be, then the absolute is just a concept. This is where we stand today. My point of view, your point of view, we seem to be quite oblivious to our condition. And we go along with it. It's the flow. Most people, what do you expect? Most people just go with the flow. So this is what we have. But it is a kind of delusion. And it presupposes a rejection of our natural condition. Of course, the early moderns speak about our natural condition in terms of our state of nature, and that supposes already that there is no God, there is no providence, there is no inalienable tie between man and God. We're lost completely in a situation where there's no rope that is hanging that we can cling to that will help us come out of this mess of this filth that we're rolling in. Now, this filth comes in the guise of a stream of compulsions. Can we come out of them? Sure, if we only trust discourse, trust reason, not a discourse that is destroying discourse, a reason that is destroying reason, which is modern reason, that ends up with, on the one hand, Hegel, the apotheosis of modern reason, and on the other side, on the Dionysian side, the dark side, with Nietzsche, so the utter destruction of reason, but a reason that is open to eternal being, without defining it in historical terms, without trying to measure the distance between man and God. Right? So it is a reason that is self-transforming for the, you could say, for the human being. It has the effect of a therapy. It's curing the human being out of its finitude, its determination. So within the logos, the self is being purged. So it's salvific. We question all ties to the earth. Consider, for instance, the Gospels, where we're told to actually hate all of our ties to this world. Why? Well, because as long as you hold on to them, as long as you're bound to the earthly, you cannot rise in the logos. Well, these are just some indications, some suggestions that arise in and as we enter into the field of logos. Right? You say, well, then we lose track of what is practical, money, power, and we start dreaming. Well, this whole idea that we are trapped in the earthly, that we are to seek empowerment and to outdo the other, outdo the neighbor, outdo your neighbor as he tries to outdo you. This is a kind of dream. And so, as long as we rest satisfied with this dream, we remain in it. But the thing is that it is not satisfying. It is miserable to live in that dream. So we cling to our misery. We cling to our misery until we leave. As we say, we die. Well, is it not our duty, perhaps, to contribute to this society of self-empowerment? Is it not our duty to establish ourselves, to be winners and not losers in this society? This is all a fancy or miserable dream. So what are we to do? Well, our classics, even you could say the literary pillars of our civilization, tell us in very spontaneous terms even, that there is a path proper to man, and then there are deviations. And you could say that from the standpoint of a classics, we are deranged, we are degenerate, we've lost our way as human beings. But then where does their point of view come from? And, they could easily say, well, it comes from logos. It is a point of view, an opinion that it has been forged, is a product, it somehow emanates from discourse itself, from reason itself. So it is a point of view that is reasonable, whereas there are other points of view or other opinions that are not reasonable. What is a reasonable point of view? Well, one that is based on reality, and that is produced through natural reason. What is an unreasonable one? Well, one that is imposed mechanically. But that is precisely what our modern views amount to, impositions. And what does this gigantic global perspectivism stand upon? Well, admittedly, the vortex.